Hello, welcome to The Moment. This time I'll be talking about Newcastle City Council's new budget, and in particular cuts that are due to be made in order to help them save money. And I'll also be talking about a new grant scheme for rural industries. But before we get to those, I want to briefly talk about a page that appeared on Northumberland County Council's website on the 10th of November. The page talks about something called the Morpeth Master plan, and it invited Morpeth residents to take part in a survey to, quote, have their say on how the town develops over the next few years. It says that the survey asks a series of questions about how services can be best delivered to local people, and seeks ideas on the future look and feel of Morpeth. Now, the survey itself closed on the 20th, but I still thought this was an interesting thing to talk about in light of the problems that the council has had with the development in Morpeth. The plans of the previous council went strongly opposed by Morpeth residents earlier in the year, and now that the development branch of the council, Arch, is being investigated by the police, it seems like they're trying to tread more carefully when it comes to the development of the town. So let's turn to the first story. Newcastle City Council has revealed its budget documents for the coming year 2018-19. They explain on their website that, quote, last year we published a 3-year plan which set out the steps we need to take to bridge the funding gap created by continued government cuts. We will have to save £13.3 million in 2018-19 in order to set a balanced budget. This means our city will have lost £282 million by 2020. And in the budget proposal itself, they explain why such savings are necessary, saying, the majority of our funding comes from government grants or redistributed business rate income. Less than a fifth of gross spending is raised from council tax. And they say this, of course, because there will be an increase in council tax as well. Quote, the combined impact of the proposed 1.95% increase in council tax and 3% social care precept will add £74.55 to the annual bill for a Band D property and £49.70 for a Band A. Along with this, the council has also proposed cuts to various services, and their website provides a list of 7 areas, from waste management to care and support for adults, where there are going to be budget reductions, and they've detailed each area in what they call integrated impact assessments for each specific area. Taking a look at the IIA titled Care and Support for Adults, it starts by outlining what the service actually does. Quote, we provide the following early intervention services to adults in the city. This helps avoid the need for more direct social care support. Prevention services, including equipment, intermediate care services and reablement. These are terms used to describe short-term NHS and/or social care support that aim to help you avoid unnecessary admission to hospital, be as independent as possible after a hospital stay, and avoid having to permanently move into a care home before you really need to. Community-based support for older people and support for carers. Now, the gross expenditure on this area of council services currently sits at £27,521,000, with a net budget of £14,130,000. Section B goes on to talk about the actual change proposals. They say there are 2 main things that continue to form the base of our proposal. Digital prevention, which is further development of our approach to self-service to support early help and prevent need developing for our care services for as long as possible. We have advocated a partnership with the public and want to ensure that people are able to find information and solutions themselves. So essentially this method comes down to the use of a website called myequipmentnewcastle.org.uk, which would act as a way to get advice without seeing a physical human being. The obvious problem is that the need to go online is going to be a barrier to entry for many, especially elderly people. And the document does hint at this by saying, quote, "We will address the risk that those not able to access digital channels may be excluded," but they don't offer much in the way of an explanation for exactly how they will do this. They do say, "We will continue to invest and develop our joint prevention hub with Community Health, the Community Health and Social Care Direct team, and have knowledgeable staff available to speak over the phone and to complete face-to-face assessments." With regards to the savings generated from this, they say, quote, "In 2018 to 19, we originally proposed to save £50,000 through a focus on self-service and demand management. This saving has now been mitigated by the improved Better Care Fund. We have made considerable savings in this area over the last few years, and this mitigation will allow us to develop a sustainable service going forwards." The second part of Section B talks about a joint approach with health, where they say, quote, "When people do need an assessment, we are proposing a joint approach with health to create a new and innovative service that can provide a trusted and shared assessment capability." The overcomplicated use of language is out in full force, and as a sentence that says absolutely nothing. Again, the focus is very much on prevention, as they say, quote, "We need to improve information sharing systems between health and social care, and to develop area-based services with health or alternate providers. Resources will be focused in the community to avoid hospital admissions." So the gist is that they want to work with the NHS to provide preventative measures so that people won't have to go to hospital as much. The problem really would come down to whether their new system would be able to cope with the demands being put upon it. If you're setting yourself up as the first port of call for everything to do with health and social care, you might find that you're swamped very quickly. Overall, they're proposing, quote, a £370,000 saving. This saving would mean a reduction in our base budget, but this has been mitigated in 2018 to 19 by the improved Better Care Fund, so there will be no change in service. This IBCF spending has been jointly agreed with our health partners and will allow time to develop a full system functionality moving forward. They also include a list of groups that have been consulted about these proposals. These groups include the Alzheimer's Society, the Carers Centre, the CCG in Primary Care, and the Elders Council. Interestingly, the CCG do bring up a point similar to what I said earlier. Their response to the proposal says, "The proposal reduction in demand through a developed self-service offer is generally welcomed. However, without safeguarding or monitoring, we would be concerned that some needs might be missed, resulting in more expensive interventions or vulnerable clients being at unnecessary risk." The Council also proposed savings through continued implementation of the National Minimum Eligibility Threshold, which is the minimum criteria that you need to meet in order to gain access to care and support. The councils say that for 2018 to 19, we estimate that using a dynamic review approach and continuing to implement the NMET will result in savings of £300,000. Dynamic reviews allow our social work teams to work more closely with people, their carers and families to achieve better outcomes with the services we arrange and provide. And overall, at the bottom of the document, they show that with these and other savings all added up, Newcastle Council predicts that they will have saved £720,000 in this specific area alone. Of course, things are still in a pre-consultation phase. This could all change at any time. But it is interesting that the council are trying to consolidate health and social care into essentially one service, at least when it comes to preventative care. Now, of course, there are 6 other IIA documents, and I won't be going through all of them. But I'll leave a link to the page if you want to read through the other areas that are going to be affected by the new budgets and in what ways. So now let's turn to the next story. Farmers around the country are now able to apply for a new government grant. The £40 million Countryside Productivity Scheme was announced earlier in the month by Environment Secretary Michael Gove and is being touted as a way to increase productivity. Gov.uk has a page that explains what the grant is and who can apply. The scheme is referred to on the page with the prefix RDPE, and RDPE is the Rural Development Programme for England. They say, quote, "The RDPE Countryside Productivity Scheme provides funding for projects in England which improve productivity in the farming and forestry sectors and help create jobs and growth in the rural economy. It is administered by the Rural Payments Agency. Under the scheme, there are grants for water resource management and reservoirs, improving forestry productivity, adding value to agri-food, and improving farm productivity. These grants are funded by the European Agricultural Fund for Rural Development." And they go on to say, "The government has guaranteed funding for RDPE Countryside Productivity Scheme grants if these are agreed and signed before the UK's departure from the EU, even if the grant agreements continue after we have left the EU. This is subject to projects meeting the following conditions when the application is assessed. They are good value for money, and they are in line with domestic strategic priorities." So they have put in some level of assurance that Brexit won't affect the scheme. However, it does mean that there is a time limit, and it's tighter than you might think, as I'll explain in just a moment. But it does seem unusual to me that they would announce a scheme funded by Europe during the Brexit process. It certainly puts the longevity of the programme in question. Handbooks are provided for each of the 4 areas that I mentioned, so let's just take a look at the Improving Farm Productivity Handbook. And now I can mention the extremely tight time limits, because right on the very first page it says, "Deadlines for application 3rd of December 2018. The other handbooks have different deadlines, some far more imminent. The Adding Value to Agri-Food Handbook says deadline for expressions of interest 29th of June 2018. For Water Resource Management it's also the 29th of June, and for Improving Forestry Productivity we have the 3rd of April 2018. Then on page 6 of every single handbook it says, quote, "The Rural Payments Agency may at any time and without further notice change the date these grants close to applications." So if you thought the deadlines were steep previously, now we learn that the opportunity could be gone at any moment. Page 9 explains what the grants are for and not for. In the case of the Farm Productivity book, it says that they can be used for, quote, "The use of robotic equipment to aid crop and livestock production, increasing the use of renewable energy produced on farm by improving storage and distribution, the use of LED wavelength-controlled lighting to aid crop production, and more effective use of livestock slurries and manures and digestates. Grant funding can help pay for buying equipment and installing machinery and equipment." Then it says, "The grants can't be used to generate renewable energy, buy irrigation equipment, fund equipment used in the processing and packaging of fruit and vegetables, crop storage, or fund anaerobic digestates." It does then say that crop storage and fruit and veg processing are covered in the Adding Value to Agri-Food book, and irrigation is in the Water Resource Management book. As for how much money can be applied for, quote, "The grants are for a minimum of £35,000. Grants can cover up to 40% of the eligible costs of a project. If the minimum grant is £35,000, then the minimum total eligible costs of a project would therefore be £87,500. On page 20 they expand on this further, saying, quote, "At least 60% of the project costs must be paid for with money from private sources, like savings or a bank loan. The maximum grant per project is normally £1 million, though they do say that you can apply for more if you need to. Grants are paid in stages. They can only be claimed after the work being claimed for is finished and has been paid for. We expect you to make a maximum of 3 claims over the course of the project. You must show that you've sufficient funds to pay for the project costs until you get the grant payments. And as far as eligible costs go, these include things like robotic equipment, which can, quote, undertake activities within the normal growing cycle of a crop or normal husbandry of livestock. For example, driverless vehicles, robotic harvesting, weeding, milking, and handling of manures and slurries. The costs also cover energy-efficient equipment, such as heat distribution networks, the installation of electrical battery storage systems, the installation of automated thermal screens in glasshouses to aid climate control, and installation of wavelength-specific LED lighting to aid crop growth and pest control. Finally, they can also cover costs to do with slurry and digestate management equipment, basically any technology that can apply, monitor, control, and record slurry and digestate. Now, the idea of a grant for various rural projects is definitely a good idea. It means that there's a focus on helping these industries gain a competitive edge as the UK prepares to leave the EU. The question is whether farmers are able to work within the parameters laid out, which are very exacting, as well as, of course, the possibility that the opportunity to apply could disappear at any time, not that it necessarily would. And it will be interesting, though, to see how these grant opportunities change farming in the northeast in particular in the next few years. And that's all for this episode. Be sure to join me in a fortnight's time for more from around Northumberland and Newcastle. Until then, I'm Oliver Ralph, and this is The Moment.